Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something I find absolutely fascinating, finding modern legal frameworks hiding in plain sight, right inside ancient texts. We tend to think of ancient history as this chaotic, maybe purely mythological era. But what if a land deal struck literally 4,000 years ago carried the exact same legal DNA as the contracts we sign today? Let's find out.
Okay, let's dive into this outline. First, we'll look at ancient laws and modern contracts. Then, we'll examine the Machpelah real estate deal itself. Next, we'll get into weighing the silver. And finally, we'll wrap up with Hebron's enduring legacy.
Section 1. Ancient Laws, Modern Contracts. It's pretty easy to look back at ancient texts and just assume their laws were a random patchwork of antiquated rules, right? But looking a little closer reveals a completely different story. Academic legal scholars, like the folks over at the University of Florida Levin College of Law, have actually studied these texts extensively. And honestly, what they've found is pretty remarkable. They view these ancient narratives as some of the earliest recorded examples of contract and tort jurisprudence. So the people in these accounts, they weren't just making things up on the fly. They had a highly rigorous, structured system in place. To really appreciate the parallels here, let's establish a quick baseline. At its core, a modern contract basically boils down to exchanging goods, services, or money, which lawyers like to call consideration. And this exchange is driven by a mutual meeting of the minds, where everyone involved explicitly understands and agrees to the exact terms. Pretty straightforward. But here's the wild part. The legal DNA between then and now is nearly identical. Our modern requirements of offer, acceptance, and consideration match up perfectly with ancient Near Eastern pillars. Public negotiation serves as the offer, mutual agreement at the city gates acts as the acceptance, and the physical weighing of silver, that's the consideration. The terminology might have changed over a few millennia, but the legal structure itself is rock solid.
All right, let's move to Section 2, the Machpelah real estate deal. Let's see exactly how this framework operates in a really famous historical case study, the purchase of the Cave of Machpelah by the biblical patriarch Abraham. The catalyst for this whole real estate transaction actually begins with a number, 127. That was the age of Abraham's wife, Sarah, when she passed away in the city of Kiriath Arba. Now, her passing was obviously an emotional trigger, but it also created a very immediate practical need. Abraham needed a permanent, legally secure burial site for his wife, and eventually for his entire family line. So the specific target he had his eye on was the Cave of Machpelah and the surrounding field facing Mamre. At the time, this prime piece of real estate was owned by a man named Ephron the Hittite. Knowing this, Abraham approaches the community to make a deal. Ephron kicks off the negotiation with what sounds, at least to modern ears, like the deal of a lifetime. He says, "I give you the field, and I give you the cave that is in it. Bury your dead." Sounds incredibly generous, right? But we really have to read between the lines here. This wasn't charity at all. This was the ancient, polite dance of haggling. Ephron was just posturing, setting the stage for the actual negotiation and ultimately the final price. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is Abraham's insistence. He responds, "I will give the price of the field, accept it from me." You might be wondering, why on earth would he refuse free land? Well, because under ancient Near Eastern common law, paying the full absolute price was strictly necessary to acquire an inheritable estate. If it was just a gift, it could be legally reclaimed by the donor's family later on. Abraham was effectively bulletproofing his purchase for generations to come. And so, the deal gets finalized, not in secret, but completely publicly at the city gate in the presence of the Hittite community. You see, the city gate was essentially the courthouse of the ancient world. Having this public forum provided the official legal witnessing of the contract, totally cementing that crucial meeting of the minds we talked about earlier. Which brings us to Section 3, weighing the silver. Let's look a little more closely at the economics of the deal, specifically the physical consideration exchanged for this land. To ground this story in some concrete mathematical reality, let's break down the specific ancient Hebrew weight metrics. Since they didn't have minted coins yet, they literally weighed precious metals. 10 gerahs made a beka, which was about 5.7 grams. 2 bekas made a shekel at roughly 11.4 grams, and 50 shekels made a mina. The agreed-upon price between Ephron and Abraham was 400 shekels of silver, and they specified it was the standard measure used by merchants. So let's do the math. If we multiply that agreed price of 400 shekels by 11.4 grams per shekel, we get exactly 4,560 grams. To put that into perspective, Abraham physically weighed out about 10 pounds of solid silver and handed it to Ephron. This absolutely wasn't just a symbolic handshake. It was a heavy, highly verifiable transfer of wealth that officially finalized the contract. Moving on to Section 4, Hebron's Enduring Legacy. Let's explore the incredible long-term historical and geographical ripple effects of this single contract.
The land Abraham bought was located in Kiriath Arba. That ancient name translates to City of the Four, named after the Anakim, who were historically described as giants. Today, though, and honestly throughout most of history, this city is known as Hebron. Its name literally means unity or connection. It's fascinating because generations after Abraham, during the time of Joshua, this specific territory was given to Caleb as his inheritance. It was even designated as one of the ancient cities of refuge, making it a legally protected safe haven.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why Abraham was so insistent on paying the full price. Just look at who ended up being buried in the cave of Machpelah. It wasn't just Sarah. It was Abraham himself, their son Isaac, and his wife Rebekah, and their grandson Jacob alongside his wife Leah. By ensuring a legally airtight, publicly witnessed contract, Abraham successfully secured an inheritable estate that served his family for generations. Tracing this land through time really shows how its significance just compounded over the centuries. What started in the patriarchal era as a family burial site became a vital tribal inheritance and a city of refuge in Joshua's time. Fast forward a bit, and Hebron actually served as King David's very first capital city for over 7.5 years before he eventually moved his throne to Jerusalem. Today, this exact site is known as the Cave of the Patriarchs. Because of that single transaction 4 millennia ago, the complex built over this cave remains a major global pilgrimage site. It's deeply revered as a historical and sacred location in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam today. It really is a powerful reminder of how ancient, historical agreements continue to shape our modern world map. So, what does this all mean for us? Well, we've seen how a detailed, ancient legal process secured a legacy that has lasted for literally millennia. If a verbal agreement for a field and a cave 4,000 years ago still shapes modern geography and our understanding of law, what will our contracts leave behind for the future? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring.